Hello, everyone, and welcome to 3 Words, a bite-sized podcast about the significant and strategic choices that you can make, that I can make to become the best version of ourselves. My name is Dr. Michael Brown, and I am the host of this 3 Words podcast, and we are here in this fantastic space during the very sad, unprecedented time, COVID-19 pandemic. But thankfully, we can be in a space where I can socially distance from my son, Justin Michael Brown, because Justin, even now, as someone who is a third-year med student, who's married to someone who's a nurse on the front lines at a hospital in town, we can't be in the same home together. So I'm so pleased that we can be here today with our longer than normal hair, and to be able to have a significant conversation that may sound a little contrary to some of the conversations we've had before here at 3 Words Podcast. And the 3 words would be, my son.
Today's 3 words are shake things up.
Shake things up. Now, what's interesting about this conversation is oftentimes I am known for talking about the power of routine and rhythm and choices and being very intentional in our lives. And that has been what I have championed for so long, this notion of intentionality. Now, during the pandemic, I still feel like intentionality is super important, but there are 3 other, for lack of a better term, I's that I am continuing to share in webinars and in digital meetings and so forth that I think are really necessary during this time. And they are inventory, imagination, and innovation. So now is a time that we should be doing an inventory of our lives and really thinking about, am I becoming the person I want to become? It's an opportunity to innovate. It's an opportunity to try new things, to maybe do things differently, maybe that we never have before. But also we need to blow open the doors on our imagination, to not just be intentional, but to be imaginatively intentional. And so that's why I want to have this conversation with you, because you, my son and fellow life coach, even as young as you might be, you really model this idea of what does it mean to be imaginative and intentional at the same time, that rhythms and routines, though they are helpful, should never become rules. What are your thoughts?
I love it. And I'm excited about this podcast in particular because it, as you said, feels a little bit in contrast to even a prior podcast that we did, Establish a Routine. And I remember as I listened to that podcast, I thought there is just so many things I want to add to my routine and things that I want to make a part of. This is what I do every day, or this is what I do every week. And there's value in that. But I think at the same time that sometimes when we're feeling stuck, or when we're feeling like we're struggling with something.
Sure.
It can be really helpful to shake things up.
Yeah.
And I think even thinking about it in terms of productivity, in terms of relationships, that sometimes when we're in such a routine, when we're just doing the exact same thing every single day, we can feel unmotivated. We can feel like the days are running together, even in the midst of this pandemic reality.
Especially now.
It's like, I'm just trying to do the exact same thing every day. There comes a point where you can't maintain that, and it drains the life out of you. So I think when we shake things up, that's when we can oftentimes be most able to experience a resurgence in our productivity and an improvement even in our attitude and our outlook about our entire life.
So have you felt that during this time? I mean, obviously you have been sheltering in place. You have been taking your classes online.
Correct.
Has it been challenging to maintain those routines?
Certainly. And I think while routine's been really helpful in one way, taking a shower every day, getting dressed every day, working out every morning, some of those things have been really good to help me to stay sane. But something I'm personally really struggling with is that I have to study only in the confines of my condo. That there's no coffee shops open. There's no libraries. I can't go to school. And I'm a big coffee shop studier. And even in the midst of right now, I'm studying for the second part of my medical licensing exam. And I'm studying 8-10 hours a day some days.
Sure.
It's hard to be all in the same spot. So something I've actually been trying to do to shake things up in the midst of my day is even to change up my environment in really small and seemingly insignificant ways.
Okay.
So for example, there's a chair in our living room that we've had for probably 2 years. I have never sat in that chair. ever.
Interesting.
You just kind of have your place in the living room. This is where I sit. This is where I do work. Yesterday, I sat in that chair for the very first time, and I had one of the most productive study sessions I've had of all of this stay-at-home order.
Now, I would presume that's Noelle's chair. Did you give you permission to use her chair?
Well, she was at work, so
okay.
Let's say. But even doing a simple environment change like that, or I switch rooms in the house. I go from the guest room, my office. I go into the living room. I switch to a different chair. I've studied in my bed before. Just the other day, I sat out on the porch, poured myself some lemonade, and even just as minor a thing as changing which chair I'm sitting in, I felt like it really significantly impacted my ability to feel motivated and productive so that I could focus on the things that I knew I had to do that day.
Well, I love the fact that you're still also staying true to our theme at D&B Coaching, this idea of intentionality. So shaking things up is not in contrast to intentionality. It's just adding to it some imagination, some innovation, some new ideas, because everything you have described to me, even in this conversation, have still been very intentional. You've intentionally shaken things up.
Yes, absolutely. And I try to, even as I look at my day and I think about this is how I'm going to spend my day, I will pre-plan in the morning, okay, I'm going to sit in this chair for the next 3 hours, and I'm going to sit in another chair for the following 3 hours.
Wow.
And then I'm going to have lunch, and then I'm going to do this restful activity, and then I'm going to go back to it in a new environment again.
So there's still routine. There's still premeditation. There's still decisions being made. Love it. Love it.
And this conversation of shaking things up goes so much beyond just making us more productive. Mm-hmm. It can help us to become better versions of ourselves in all the different dimensions.
Talk to me about that.
So I think about even the physical dimension of life. I'm a big workout at home kind of guy. And finding new workouts even that I can just change up my routine of, I always do this workout, on Tuesdays I do this workout, on Wednesdays I do this workout. Over time, your body kind of gets used to those. But when you switch the activity, that's when you can see a lot of progress in the way that your body responds. Sure. And it's like, I think you were telling me the other day that you did yoga for the first time or something like that.
And I had trouble walking for the next 24 hours.
Right. But you're incredibly in shape. So why is it that doing an activity that was new caused you to feel so much soreness? It's because it was new and you were flexing new muscles by shaking things
And
up.
Justin, I know that because obviously fitness trainers always are saying to actually trick your muscles and to break through that muscle memory. It makes a significant difference and even breakthroughs. So it's resonating with me. Tell me more.
So beyond even the physical dimension, the relational dimension, thinking about in a marriage where especially in the midst of this pandemic where it's like we're home every evening and which
Netflix show are we going to watch tonight?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So trying to get out of the rhythm of, okay, we've been watching a Netflix show after dinner every day and then we kind of just watch shows and then we maybe eat some dessert and then we go to bed. But there are things that we've talked about doing that we've wanted to do for a while, and ways even that we can be creative right now that while we can't leave the house, we can do things that we have never done before. It wasn't until the pandemic that my wife and I made our first puzzle together. Another thing that we did was creating a charcuterie board. What else have we done? Even finding new sports and activities to do. We've played a lot of tennis outside.
Well, I know you've been drawing.
Yes.
And is Noelle a part of that process too? Is she sitting there with you when you're drawing?
She is. Well, I'm very particular in the way I do it. So it takes me several hours longer than it takes her to do a painting. But yeah, painting has been something that I've picked up and it's felt life-giving to me.
Sure.
Even, I try to plan out my recreation time and, I should do this. But then there's some times where I don't want to read a book for recreation.
Yeah.
Painting sounds more restful right now. So not feeling like I have to stick to my routine. I don't have to stick to my plan. And I loved how you said earlier, this idea of routines don't have to be rules. And I know for me, one of my big routines is I try to go to bed at 10 p.m. so that I can wake up at 5 and start my morning off strong. And that allows me to be more productive. But there are times where I choose to say, this is my routine, but I'm going to stay up for an extra hour and a half and spend more time with Noelle this evening. And it means so much to her because even if I have to push back my workout the next day, or maybe I don't get my workout in the next day, or I start studying a little bit later and I just have to be a little bit more efficient in the way that I study, or I study through lunch or whatever it might be, that routine that I have, if I keep it so strict that it's a rule, it can harm the other dimensions of my life.
Yep. And what I'm hearing you say is that variety is our friend, and that even these disruptions and these interruptions can actually bring life, and can bring energy. And I think you even used the term re-energized and refueled you for that day. That there is structure, but there's also spontaneity. But regardless of where it is, and between structure and spontaneity and shaking things up, there's still that intentionality. You're being very thoughtful, and proactive in those conversations and in those decisions.
So as we talk about this in the midst of this global pandemic, I've been thinking a lot about what are the things that I want to carry from this season in the midst of a pandemic into the post-pandemic reality that hopefully is soon. Right. I'm curious, Dad, what are the things that you feel like you have learned to be more creative in your life? And how do you want to carry some of that creativity and innovative nature into the next season? What's that look like?
Yeah. So my dear friend and I, Bo Johnson, who's in Atlanta, one of our life coaches, we've been talking about, are there things that now we're noticing previous to the pandemic that now that we are in it, we're like, we want to leave it there? And what are the things that we're experiencing now that we want to take with us into this new normal? Because we're not going to go back to normal. We're going to have new normals. And I know, particularly for both of us, this idea that meetings don't need to be long. They can be shorter and more powerful. We can accomplish more. And I think so often when we're driving to a meeting or meeting face to face, we tend to make those long meetings. And so that's one example for me where I've had to be creative. But yeah, I just love this notion, Justin, because I think that people are looking for opportunities to shake things up.
Right.
Now, interestingly, you already like working out in your home. So that was easy for you because they shut down the gyms, and the rest of us who like to work outside of the home, work out outside of the home. This has been a real challenging time. But what I'm hearing you say is, regardless, we need to shake things up. We need to try new things. We need to be imaginative. And I love the fact that my son can continue to teach me lessons about how to live best, not only during this pandemic, but even beyond. And so for those who are listening, and for those who are tuning in, maybe watching on YouTube or listening to us on their favorite podcast, this might be the time. This might be the moment to shake things up. For life coaching, consulting services, or to hire a keynote speaker, please visit dmbcoaching.com.